last decade, been in 17 countries in the last 7 months, putting this vehicle together and looking at opportunities. Within his platform, I think there was a bit of a ceiling with respect to how dedicated and focused they could be on the games ecosystem. And for me at Lionsgate, it was a lot of fun to stand up their games business. We put 20 plus products into the wild. Everything from integrating commercially John Wick into Fortnite to standalone Power Rangers mobile games and social casino games based on Orange is the New Black and Mad Men and the whatnot. But at the end of the day, that is a traditional media company. The street was putting pressure on that business to stick to their core business. And so I was kind of hitting a ceiling with respect to the amount of activity that I could do. I was doing a lot of personal investing. And so it was a moment in time where Phil and I decided, hey, let's do this together now. LionTree, where Nick works, the founder of LionTree, Aryeh Berkoff, who's the former chairman of the investment bank at UBS, he and I have been friends for almost 20 years. We met on a games deal in Finland, Sulake Habbo Hotel.
Yep, of course.
And from that day, we always talked about what is it that we can do together. And then he hired Nick. And I was one of those first phone calls where he said, I think, I got the guy. And it was serendipitous. I mean, the universe was definitely speaking. And one of the frustrations that we had seen over the years from operators and entrepreneurs, and I'd seen it myself as an operator and an entrepreneur, was you would take funding from a marquee VC, but it would be a person or two within that VC as a general fund that would be focused on gaming. You didn't really get the weight of the firm. And in fact, oftentimes these CEOs and these entrepreneurs would spend more time going back to that fund or that firm and educating them about gaming, which was somewhat counterintuitive. And we decided having a singularly focused vehicle, fortunately with Los Angeles and San Francisco becoming these power hubs in gaming that they just were not before. We're also in that ecosystem. We have access from the CXO level down. We have a unique strategic portfolio of LPs that we've strung together. So we think, we've got some fun advantages in the marketplace, and we play really well with others. And with the metrics, some of which, Phil was talking to earlier, the engagement metrics, the demographics, and quite frankly, for traditional media companies, it's no longer a luxury for them to be in gaming. It's a strategic imperative.
Yeah.
This is a consuming constituency that will not see a cable bill and they will not see a satellite bill. So for a lot of these businesses, this is a way for them to retain that intimate conduit into the cohort.
So you guys are out of the chute now, and I know we're not going to talk about specific LPs, but I understand there's a pretty impressive group that you've assembled. Let's talk a little bit about where investment criteria. What are you doing? Seed deals, Series A? What's the range of deal size that you guys are doing?
Sure. The way to think about our fund is we do half early stage and half late stage, half infrastructure and platforms, and half game developer publishers, and half US and half international. On the stage, to your question, we tend to be the first institutional money that invest in a company. Typically, company will have a product out on the infrastructure side or a beta product or a company in beta as a developer publisher. We have made investments in seed investments, especially when we've known the entrepreneur in the past and so forth. On the later stage, we're seeing great opportunities with companies that have hit escape velocity, many of which Nick represents on the banking side.
Yeah. Are you set up so that you can also participate in follow-on rounds?
Yeah, absolutely. We typically invest through the lifestyle or the life of the company, for sure.
So there, we all know that there are kind of a handful of other funds out there that are invested into the game space. I mean, I've been on this stage with John Goldman, and he has his fund over at Graycroft. Signia, Rick Thompson has done a fair amount of investing in the game space. Axiomatic has been on the stage here too. How do you guys differentiate? I've heard that it's a pretty close-knit group as well. So you may be working with these folks too. How do you kind of one differentiate, and then two, how do you see yourselves working with other guys in the space?
Sure. Well, I mean, a big differentiator for us is Nick and the LionTree platform. I think, Nick's ability to understand what's happening upstream with macro market dynamics is of great value to our portfolio companies and to our LPs. I think LionTree as well, when you look at the worlds of gaming and media, have collided in a way that we always wanted them to, and now it's just happening. So the fact that they are as active as they are within that environment, that's a huge differentiator. I think another one is how hands-on we are. It's a very tactical, operational relationship with our portfolio companies and our LPs. One of the things that we can do, a muscle that we can flex that I don't think others can, so many of the bigger games universes out there and many of our LPs are constantly searching for third-party intellectual property with which to work. We've done more of that work than anyone that I know.
Yep.
And it goes the other way. So taking traditional IP and bringing it to the gaming universes and bringing games intellectual property and helping adapt that into other environments of media to help expand their TAM, to bring new audiences to that conversation. I think that's another big differentiator. And I think we work very well with all the other funds. There's a lot of deal flow back and forth. Some of them aren't 100% focused, with this. This is, one of multiple hats that they wear. And again, I think geographically, strategically, we happen to be in these markets where we have that access that others may not. So we're often one of the first calls when these companies that are, perhaps seed financed by other vehicles, they want to achieve that escape velocity. They need access to that ecosystem. We're that first call, that first email. So it is somewhat fraternal and cooperative.
And with the LionTree relationship, is there a formal relationship? And if so, like what does that look like?
Yeah, LionTree is a general partner in the fund.
Okay.
So it's hardwired in. There's no obligation to work with us on the advisory front, but that service is sort of available. So portfolio companies will call and ask questions around M&A dynamics, around trade-offs they're making between growth and profitability. I mean, those sorts of issues are very prevalent in the early stages of a company's growth. Whether or not to take that strategic round, as enticing as it may be, what will that do to strategic options down the road? Where are multiples trending? The background on big transactions that happen. So we're able to provide all that advice without somebody having to actually hire a banker to get that perspective. And then on the other end, really helping to provide visibility to buyers, early where there's a good fit, a mutual fit. We just sold Phoenix Labs, which was actually one of the companies Phil had seed invested, ended up being sold to one of our LPs in the fund, Garena. And it was a great transaction. After going out to 75 people, really seeing a great team find a home with a buyer who controls the Southeast Asian market like they do and distribution the way they do. I think it's a really great combination.
It was a perfect example of our model. I mean, Phil, first money in, founded early, brought it to his LPs to syndicate it. Nick, amongst others, met with the business. Nick prevailed, with the business and ended up with one of our LPs. That's the virtuous cycle, that we're creating with this model. And it's a unique model that we're deploying against. We haven't seen it yet in the market.
It's also a good example of a new category to invest in from the venture perspective. PC games are also always sort of difficult to invest because of the amount of money and time required. So before we invested, it typically took 5 years to make a great PC game with a high Metacritic rating and probably $50 million plus. When we invested, though, it only, they said it's going to take us $30 million in 3 years. So significantly less time and money. And they were actually pretty much on plan. And once they created that great PC game, they went cross-platform, which is a huge trend we're all looking at today, and we're able to really succeed in the market.
Let's talk a little bit about the gaming ecosystem and kind of your, I think, Phil, you mentioned you guys are roughly kind of targeting 50% game developers, game publishers, 50% tech services, platforms, et cetera. Talk a little bit about that and that kind of rough formula, and then also kind of where are the areas of opportunity on the game kind of content side of things, and then on the tech and services side.
Sure. Well, the infrastructure side is a core area for all of gaming, and we see the platforms as similar to infrastructure, but more consumer-facing and touching the customer. I was a seed investor in Discord, single-digit $1 million valuation. Today, huge growth. 90 million users use on a monthly basis. And
does everyone know Discord, by the way? Anybody not? Very few hands. I mean,
Look into it.
Exactly.
You should definitely look into it.
But the ability to create that much market value by finding a need through that type of infrastructure is out there. And as our industry grows, there'll be more and more opportunities on the infrastructure and platform side. On the publishing side, we tend to be very data-driven and metrics-oriented. We look very closely, for mobile games, for example, at ARPDAUs, average revenue per daily active user, retention rates, virality, and we know that there are certain metrics that represent a AAA quality mobile game. We try to find companies that are in beta that have those metrics that can be scaled with a good customer acquisition strategy. So those are two different approaches to infrastructure and developer publishers.
Okay. We've had a number of discussions over the last couple of days on esports, and it seems to me that there's a lot of excitement about the space and about the growth. Maybe less excitement from the investment community, and there were some folks who went in early and got into franchises or teams and thought that was going to be the home run. Maybe it hasn't quite panned out the way they thought. What is a good investment in esports today?
Yeah, I mean, we've been very open. We do not believe funds like ours should be investing in teams, or at least it doesn't fit the profile of our fund. It's a longer time horizon. I could tell you with Immortals, we have AEG, largest events company in the world, as a major shareholder, and Steve Cohen on the board with myself. They came in and said, look, it took us 23 years to make Major League Soccer make sense, and now these franchises are selling for north of $500 million. So it's a slower growth trajectory, and we subscribe to that. We're also going to have multiple LPs in the fund that have ownership stakes, so there's inherent conflict there. Right. So it boxes that out. What we're very excited about, and in fact, one of the investments that we made that we haven't yet messaged to the marketplace, is in and around esports. So platform and infrastructure. And again, if you look at our track records, Phil and I, it's one of the reasons why we've gravitated to one another over the years. We've been about 50% platform and infrastructure as investors and about 50% studios in content. So it was natural for us to codify that template. But it's the picks and shovels and the middleware and everything in and around competitive gaming that we're incredibly excited about. You can't argue with the engagement metrics and the consumption patterns and the metrics associated. Again, you're dealing with a cohort that has aggressively migrated away from traditional media platforms, from marketers. So now you have so many folks out there trying to figure, how do we re-engage, right? How do we drop that line and re-engage with that audience? So competitive gaming or esports is a fantastic way with which to do that. I think it takes discipline. It's one of the things, look, as a guy who ran an interactive business at a major studio, I was probably the only one in my position, or one of the only ones who didn't invest in a VR production company, right? Phil was my only VC peer who didn't invest in a VR production company. And we took a lot of arrows, from my peers, from my chairman and CEO, Phil, from, his peer group up north. And, these days, those folks are writing those down, and those companies have dramatically pivoted in new directions. And some of that, we believe in VR long term. Just think it was the shiny toy. And one of the terms we use, there's a lot of tourist capital that came into it, and there's a lot of tourist capital in competitive gaming. I think that's getting to your point. Some of that early capital is getting fleshed out. The greater games landscape definitely drives what's happening in competitive gaming and not the other way around. So that's been our perspective on it.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of how you source your deals and what criteria you're looking at in an investment. There are different philosophies on this. Some folks are really focused on the team first and foremost. It's all about the team. It's all about the market size and opportunity. How do you guys, what criteria are most important to you? And then also, how are you sourcing deals today?
Well, as a general philosophy, we believe in terms of team, market, product, and then the deal we're investing in, but it's very team-driven. There has to be a great market, but I'd rather invest in a great team in a bad market than a bad team in a great market. Yeah. We see about 1,000 companies a year. It's very vibrant. So much of it is drinking from a fire hose, given the networks that we have. But it's really important to take a step back and look at what's out there, what areas are we interested in that we want to go pursue and find the companies in those categories. And that's a big part of what we do. I think Nick could probably talk to sort of the later stage deal flow. He sees so much. I mean, half of what we do, many of the companies we see just aren't actually out actively raising money, but he's got such a strong relationship with these companies in later stages. We're seeing really great opportunities.
Yeah, many of the winners haven't needed to raise capital. They've been profitable at the later stages, but there have been great investment returns to be had in some of those later stage financings where there is a very sustainable quality of growth, where it be a platform or something with a network effect or something where it's an indispensable tool to the overall ecosystem. Lots of boats are rising against this backdrop of just so much demand from consumers. And so being in dialogue with some of these parties around strategic transactions where an alternative could be raising capital presents some interesting sort of off-market proprietary opportunities for Griffin.
So I'm curious, there's, I think we've had a lot of discussion over the past couple of days here just about the game ecosystem and there's so much crossover today into the content IP industry. How do you guys kind of look at the value of recognized IP versus original IP? And when you're making a content investment, which for a long time has been kind of considered one of the more riskier investments, although I have a counter view on that, and I think today certainly with kind of the streaming wars going on and all the money that's being plowed into video production, some of that risk is less than before. But in the game industry, when you're thinking about a content play, what are you looking for?
I think it's a wonderful moment in time where established third-party IP that can migrate from more traditional forms of media. They're getting a tremendous amount of traction and success and positive consumer reaction within the gaming universe. So that's titles, everything from Marvel to Star Wars, right, to Lord of the Rings, to Hobbit, on down, John Wick. So it's a really fun time for these two constituencies to be interoperating. I think the days of this, it's a licensee-licensor dynamic are far gone. And if folks are still clinging to that model, it's a failed model and you're leaving a lot of money on the table. I think these days people realize if you can mutually align interests, you can bring these brand equities into the games universe and vice versa.
Yep.
You can bring gaming intellectual property into more traditional forms of media. I mean, look at The Witcher, right, on Netflix. It was a great, more recent example of that. Or even onto social media platforms where it's no longer purely about promotion or marketing, but it's about extending the audience and creating commercial opportunities for potential marketing partners. So I think for the first time ever, you have these two communities, playing together in a way that we would theoretically, talk about and wish for. And now it's happening in real time. And when you look at the subscription services, that are coming to pass, again with Google with Stadia and Apple with Arcade, Microsoft with xCloud, and there's another 7 or 8 of these new actors entering the theater. And then you look at the Disney Plus model of, well, how did we create this gravity? We brought in these fantastic brand equities. We brought in Star Wars. We brought in Marvel, right? We brought in Disney proper and Pixar, and that created that pull. And The Mandalorian delivered. They executed against it. So I think for a lot of these folks, these new players out there, the attraction to establish brand equities to pull them into their universes and bring those audiences with is extremely compelling.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add one thing from an M&A perspective. Having sold Kabam, which had a hit game in Contest of Champions, that's a Marvel-branded IP. 3 years ago, I would say that the overall, sort of buyer appetite was somewhat muted in that one capacity. It was regarded as a world-class team who had achieved success, scaled a mobile game, but the royalties associated with that, license were more of a drag on the P&L than it was, a strategic motivation for a company like Netmarble in Korea to come buy the company. And we just sold Fox Next games for Disney, which actually just closed today. And
we had Scopely on a discussion earlier on that. Yep.
Yeah, and that was a wildly competitive process. It wasn't just Scopely, obviously, interested in buying that business. And I'd say the pendulum has really swung where lots of strategics are looking actually for that capability. A team has taken a third-party IP and activated it in an important market like mobile gaming. And that's just too important a capability to be outsourcing. You think about Activision with mobile Call of Duty, they just reported north of 150 million downloads, which is a terrific sort of activation of an IP ahead of a AAA launch. So you get a lot of momentum going into the actual launch of the core AAA game. But that game was actually built by Tencent. So to see sort of such a fundamental extension of a core property outsourced to Tencent for development, it just shows you how hard it is to get these mobile games right. So coming back to the question, I think today, the ability to work with a third-party IP and really create a unique digital experience and really activate those brands where the fans are is an increasingly strategic capability.
And I want to pick up on something you said. We had a speaker from Epic Games this morning who gave a whole presentation on Unreal and the applications in the film and television industry. Yeah. Mandalorian was one of the examples. I mean, the power of a game engine to be able, this virtual production system to be able to help to develop new IP and then have the assets ready to go into all these different mediums. It's a pretty exciting time.
It's great. You're going to see more of it. I mean, we've been presented no less than a half dozen, models where that's exactly what the product roadmap, aspires to be. So again, I think you have these communities now that are aggressively trying to figure out how to play together, how to be more efficient with data. You can A/B test in a very truncated window. All of these things that are coming to pass. But Epic and Unreal, I mean, I think what those guys are doing is a great example, both with what they're doing in terms of the engine and not just licensing it out, for game developers and publishers, but to integrate it into these more linear forms of storytelling. And also they're embracing of third-party IP and treating it again as not just a stunt, but a true way to grow their audience.
We have about 3 minutes left. Are there any questions in the audience? I think I see one right over here. Yep.
Yeah, really interesting company in the platform infrastructure space, a company called Streamlabs, which for a lot of people here may not know, but it's about the graphics and the chat and everything else. And I was watching them for a number of years. They were acquired by Logitech, and from my vantage point, I'm not saying it was like a bad deal. I'm sure it was a great deal, but those guys were super hot, and I thought that exit to Logitech was a little bit of a bearish signal. Like I thought they would be more on a Discord type of path. And I didn't see that. But you have these companies, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, et cetera. Is that a sector that's of interest? Or how do you take the Streamlabs transaction? What's your read on that transaction to Logitech?
I can't speak for Logitech's, intentions to buy it. I mean, I think there's two different models. You can develop your company within a larger platform, and many times Logitech will outsource, and others will outsource its innovation by buying startups. That's where we come in. Sometimes companies sell too early. I mean, that's the role of the board to figure out, is this the right time to monetize or really expand on the vision of the company? So many times innovation ends when big companies buy them, which is why Discord exists, because Skype really just stopped innovating after Microsoft bought them. So it's a tricky question because it's a category we like, for sure, and I think there'll be other opportunities there. Sometimes companies sell too early. We see it all the time. Sometimes it's perfect to have a larger platform to expand, and they need that to be able to grow and fulfill their mission.
Any other questions? So I have another question, and that is, like when you guys kind of look out now 2 to 5 years, what really excites you? What do you think some of the trends are going to be that we're maybe just starting to see emerge right now that you want to be on top of?
I think true cross-platforming, right? So we're starting to see some really fun stuff in true cross-platforming. Again, Phoenix Labs, which Phil invested in, and Nick just sold. Nick sold 2 businesses in the last week. Go Nick. Fox Next and Phoenix Labs. We like having him on our team. Yeah. But I think true cross-platforming, Fortnite was a great example of it, right? It opened up, mid-core games to, 14-year-old girls, right? Because of the social components to it. 5G and cloud gaming will allow for you to be ambulatory with any gaming experience anywhere you are. So that's just going to further increase engagement metrics and spending. So that's a trend that we're seeing more and more companies bake into their product roadmap earlier, which is great for everything we're talking about up here.
We also invested in Network, which is based in San Francisco. And they've got a game called Legendary right now that is a combination of match 3, bubble shooting, Candy Crush style with leveling up of your characters and so forth. That combination mashup is a really interesting category to us. I think it's going to expand in the mobile landscape.
Fantastic. I think we're out of time. I want to thank you guys for coming out.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to watching what we do.
We should get a picture in front of our.
Thank you to our panelists. We now have a networking break. The track sessions will resume at 3:30 p.m. on the lobby level, and the video, TV, movies track will be held in this room, the Bayview Ballroom.